The University of Ghana entered into an agreement with Africa Integras in 2015 to construct infrastructure on build, operate and transfer terms. Construction started in 2016, but by 2017, the arrangement had been discontinued. The current Vice-Chancellor of the university, Professor Oduro Wusu, in addressing the termination of the contract, called it one that enslaved the university. Education Minister Matthew Poku Prempeh says the university is in danger of being privatized if a solution cannot be found to the matter. There have even been reports of an arbitration awarding costs in the matter. In the light of the intense public interest in this matter, we decided to also find out what Africa Integras has to say on this. Andrea Pizziconi is the managing founder and principal of Africa Integras, and she's my guest on Face to Face today. But before then, let us play back an earlier episode of Face to Face in which we interviewed the former Vice-Chancellor of the University of Ghana, Professor Ernest Aite, on the same matter.
Anybody who knows how universities work around the world and here in Ghana would know that it's not possible. It's not possible to do a one-man show. The university has rules that are captured both in the act establishing it and in the statutes. One of the things I pride myself in very much is the fact that I came to appreciate the act and the statutes very, very well. And as a result, was always guided by these. There's absolutely no way you can borrow, and the statutes are very clear as a vice-chancellor, you can borrow money without the approval of the university council. It's not possible. So I would have expected that if I was entering into an agreement of a financial nature for which I had no authority for the 3 years that this was negotiated, somebody would have raised the issue that why are you negotiating this? You know, when we signed the agreement in full public view at the Great Hall with all the former vice-chancellors present, all the council members of the university present, ministers of state present, students, faculty present, why did anybody say that we haven't approved this? I hope you understand me. So the whole transaction, I've written about it, but these innuendos, these rumors that have been let out by a section of people at the university are not founded or not grounded in any facts. I've been extremely surprised that these issues have been out in the public space, and nobody has found it fitting or appropriate to do a thorough investigation of it.
Have they spoken to you?
Well, journalists have asked me questions.
No, I mean the university.
The university. The university invited me to a meeting. We had a half discussion for about 30 minutes. And, I have made the offer on several occasions that let's put these agreements down, bring everybody involved. Let's sit down, and if there are any questions that you have, ask me. Ask me any questions that you believe that I'm best placed to answer. It hasn't happened. Let's have a proper criminal investigation if necessary. It hasn't happened. So, for me, it's clear that people don't want to know the truth. Today, I'm stating it again. If anybody believes that I did something wrong, let him come out and say it publicly. Ernest Aite did this wrong.
Do you believe that $64 million deal was the best deal you could have gotten for the university?
There's no doubt in my mind, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that the agreement that we entered into was the best at the time. And there's also enough information that since that agreement was signed, and since the project began, many other opportunities have been provided for us to even improve on our situation within the agreement, which has not been taken up by the university. So the misinformation, the lies, for me are not warranted. It's obvious to me that it's intended to tarnish my image. But I can assure you that even with all of this going on, my life continues.
Are you disappointed with the way the university community that you led has handled this issue?
You know, many things have happened that I believe could have been done differently. And there are many people who have authority in this country who could have said, what's going on? Let's sit down, let's talk about it, let's discuss it, let's investigate what's going on, but haven't. So if there's disappointment, there are many places where you can place it. The fact that you retire and you want to have some peace of mind to do other things, and it's not happening because people are simply not doing what they should be doing. It's very sad, you know. It's very, very sad. But hey, I've moved on, and I've offered that why don't you give the agreement to some of the best finance guys, best architects, best engineers, best lawyers to go through and tell us. You know, I've seen a lot of misrepresentation of what's in it. I've seen a lot of false analysis done based on figures in there, all intended to misrepresent what's in the agreement. And people hide behind non-disclosure clauses in there. I mean, it's, you know.
But they say you had those NDAs put in the contract. That is why they cannot talk about it.
It's not true. It is not true. You know, the agreement was signed by University of Ghana and Africa Integras based on discussions that the two parties had. Lawyers from both sides poured through this. The lawyers made recommendations and we accepted. So it isn't, I mean, anybody that says that only NSIT did this, I can assure you it's a liar. Anybody that says that the University of Ghana, its council, its senior management, its executive committee had no knowledge of the discussions that went into the agreement, it's a liar. There's a lot of pain there, I must say, but I've moved on. Okay. I have moved on. I take a lot of satisfaction from seeing that many of the young students that I worked with are doing very well in their careers. I take a lot of pride in seeing a lot of the young faculty that we produced or we invited and supported are doing extremely well. So that's where the satisfaction comes from. And there are enough records to show that. There are minutes of meetings that easily show or vindicate my position. They have records of what people said at meetings, their contribution to discussions, what documents they had, you know. So there is enough information to show at the university that everything I've said is true. You know, people have said things like the money that was going to be paid was simply for the $64 million that was being spent on the construction. It is not true. It's a BOT, build, operate, transfer, build, operate for 25 years. For 25 years, the maintenance of those buildings was going to be part of the rent being paid. For 25 years, the rehabilitation of those buildings was going to be part of the equipment used in the laboratories, was going to be part of it. It doesn't come that cheap anywhere, you know. But when people talk about it, it's very convenient. They say, oh, the university went and borrowed 64. It is not true. Somebody was going to spend 64 minutes to build. That's only for the construction. And when it is finished, for 25 years, the maintenance of the building, the operation of the building, the staff salaries and so for 25, it's all part of the rent that you're paying, you know? And that has been kept away from the public. That's not been part of any discussion. It's extremely unfortunate. It's designed to destroy me, but I can assure you it's not going to happen.
On Face to Face today is the founder and principal of Africa Integras, Andrea Pizziconi. Andrea, hello and welcome to Face to Face.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm sure you're looking forward to this particular trip to Ghana. You haven't been here in a while.
I haven't been here in a while. I've missed coming.
And I'm sure you wished it was under better circumstances.
Of course. Well, first, this is a very hospitable country, so it's always wonderful to see friends and supporters, and in general, when one lands in Ghana, you feel like you were at home. But of course, yes.
Tell us a bit about your company, though.
My company. Where do we start? Well, I guess for the last over a dozen years, we've been focused on delivering higher education infrastructure to the continent through public-private partnerships mostly. I've been doing university development since 1999, so nearly 20 years, I guess, or it's coming up on 20 years. And it's a niche that carried me right through university myself. So Africa Integras came out of actually an invitation from a vice chancellor in Sierra Leone, and in part from the British government, who believed that with the various interests on the continent, that Africa was a young continent with an incredible amount of human capital potential, and that university education is the only. It's the one factor that no one can deny will be a game changer in terms of long-term economic growth. And so I was one of the few university developers at the time, and so the British government invited us to come. We have had an extensive history throughout the continent, but I'm perhaps the most proud of the project. I was most proud of the project at the University of Ghana, in part because one of my oldest mentors was an alum, Hatio Fosuama.
Oh, okay.
And he encouraged me to keep going. It can be hard to start any business. It's hard to start a business, or I should say to move a business to a new continent. And so when we moved our operations or started to focus more on Africa as opposed to the US, it meant getting to know new places, new people, new culture, how to be humble, how to adjust what you do so that it's compatible and to accommodate. And he was a very encouraging force for me to keep going. And so I was very proud that his alma mater would be one of our largest, most significant projects.
So where did the interest come in? Where did Africa Integras meet the University of Ghana and say, this is where we can go forward? Where did it start from?
So in general, we always start from the premise of we go where we're invited. And that's a very important principle for us. Part of the story begins before I was involved. I gather that the university held a conference of about 100 investors, and they had invited Ernst & Young to be one of the advisors during that period. And the conference was to discuss PPPs. We were not at that conference, but from that conference, they invited interest from investors. They did not get an acceptable fit in terms of investors that had both the expertise and the financial capacity. But one of the investors at that conference evidently said, but we've heard that there is this other company and you might consider reaching out to this other company. So we were invited by the university.
Okay.
They reached out to us. They sent us a letter of invitation. It happened to be that I had in New York a Ghanaian lawyer at the time, even though we were not doing business in Ghana, but Ghanaians, wherever you are in the world, are the top of your field. So I asked my lawyer to meet with the university first to vet the opportunity, and it seemed viable, and it seemed like we could be of assistance. And so that began in December 2013, and then seriously the discussions began in early 2014.
Okay. And what were the details of the arrangements that Africa Integras came to with the University of Ghana? What were you supposed to do for the University of Ghana?
Sure. So The university was very interested in materially expanding its infrastructure. There had not been a significant expansion at the university for quite some time. And of course, the population continues to grow. But also, the administration, the vice chancellor at the time, was very keen to see the University of Ghana become a world-class research institution. So to be a research institution, you need to have a larger amount of space per pupil. Particularly for graduate students. And so there was an emphasis on wanting to create more academic space to recruit more graduate students to the university, also to accommodate the additional growth in the population and to make sure that the University of Ghana could accommodate its citizens, but also for the University of Ghana to become more of a hub university on the continent that would be welcoming to international students as well. The idea is that a world-class university is one that has students from all walks of life, economically, geographically. They come to study with the best professors in the world, and what they create changes society in the world. So that was their aspirations. They asked us to construct, they set the scope. So they asked us to construct 4 new academic colleges. Those colleges were the College of Humanities, College of Basic Applied Science, and the Institute of Technology. There was the medical school, and also the College of Education. The Education College was interesting because UG had not previously had a College of Education, so we were quite excited about that. The impact of being able to educate more teachers, I think very relevant, especially today when you have universal secondary education policies that the new government has proposed, which are wonderful to hear. You need the teachers to be of the highest quality to deliver that education. And so that college was of particular interest to me. In addition to that scope, we were to construct 1,000 dormitory beds. Those were to support the medical school. So the medical school currently at UG is about an hour away. This was to bring the medical school onto the campus, to accommodate those students on campus, and it is located right next to the new teaching hospital.
So all this was valued at $64 million.
Yes, so this expansion, this site, or all of these 5 sites combined, is about 48,000 square meters, represents about a 60% expansion of the current infrastructure of the university. So it's a pretty large project. And the ultimate cost to construct it was approximately $64 million.
And it was a build, operate, transfer.
That's right.
How exactly was that going to work, if you care to elaborate?
Sure. So in a build, operate, transfer, there's a concession agreement. We negotiate the terms of the contract. It is our responsibility to, it's a risk-sharing relationship. PPPs are about sharing risk in an intelligent way. So they bear certain risks that they can control better. We bear certain risks that we can control better. So in this risk-sharing relationship, they were bearing the risk of market demand. So if we built it, they needed to ensure that they could fill it. They were bearing inflation risk because, you know, as a public university backed by a government, they have more control than we do about inflation, so to speak. And all of those terms are negotiated in the contract. These are, all PPPs share these same complexions. They bear typically planning risk, so things like getting the permits and whatnot. And what we bear are, we bear the design risk, the execution risk, so we have to build it. We need to secure the financing, so we bear financing risk. And then we bear operations risk, so we need to maintain those buildings for the life of the BOT period, which can be anywhere from 20 to 30 years typically. Sometimes it goes up to 50 years, but in this case, go ahead.
Now, so in the course of all these meetings, who were you meeting, basically? That is Africa Integras and who from the University of Ghana? We
met everybody at the university. I mean, we were required, and it makes sense, and we welcomed this. We always welcome this. We met the entire academic committee. We met all of the heads of departments. Every dean of each school needed to sign off on the drawings and on the plans, and so we brought our technical team. We had a technical team here in Ghana. We initially worked with AECOM as the project manager, so they were heavily involved. So we would convene meetings, and we would go through and have design charrettes, and we would have upwards of 25 academics in the room that I would present to, my team would present to, and they would give us feedback.
Over what period were these meetings going on?
So the main negotiations the initial negotiations, I should say, happened between January 2014, and then the first concession agreement was signed in July 2014. And that was presented to the council, of course. I mean, we can't proceed with a contract that's not fully approved by the council, that's not previously approved by the requisite management organizations of the university. We use, as background, we use US government financing, OPIC. So they and we are quite scrutinous that all governance is maintained. So one of the processes when you get US government financing is that they'll do their own due diligence to confirm that all approvals have been obtained and that every stakeholder has been engaged. So we needed to see that the university had engaged the students, that they had engaged the faculty, the staff, and all of that happened during that first 6-month period. Then typically what happens is that you sign a contract, but has always been the case in every deal we've done, then the senior lender will fully engage to do their due diligence. So before the contract's signed, they will watch, they will give high-level feedback, but they need to see that the two parties fundamentally agree on the commercial terms, and then they'll step in. And what is inevitable is that they will require changes as well. So then from July to the following July, for about 12 months, that was then consumed with the due diligence period for OPIC and for the investors. So we brought 3 different investors to the university. It was a collaborative project or process to choose what we both believed would be the most appropriate investor. We invest some money, but as typical in PPPs, we will then bring other investors into the project. So those 12 months were consumed with the senior lender due diligence and the investor due diligence. And then the contract was amended accordingly to accommodate the requirements of the senior lender. Typically, there are language changes required and whatnot, and that goes back to the council. The council then gets briefed on those changes. Depending on how material they are, then that dictates usually how much the council is briefed. Oftentimes, they might delegate it to their legal counsel. But then the contract was amended again in July and then finally again in September of 2015.
Was there a point in all this where Africa Integras felt it was not dealing with the university council, it was dealing with an individual, that is the vice chancellor then?
No, I have to say, and I've heard this feedback, the vice chancellor was clearly a driving force, but we dealt a lot with the finance director. We dealt a lot with the legal counsel. We dealt with the finance team, because a lot of our work centered around looking at the audited financials of the university. So the university had been working with PwC to get internationally independently audited financials. A lot of the due diligence was focused on that. So we were working more with the guys in the weeds. We did not engage with the university council, but it was our requirement to see the meeting minutes where our project was presented, and they needed to show us that the project had been presented and approved by the council.
And you were convinced that these things had been done?
For sure. Having seen the meeting minutes and whatnot, we were fully convinced that, and of course the council, they showed up to the various signing ceremonies, and so I assume that they knew why they were there.
Okay.
And also OPIC does not finance easily. I don't know how OPIC has done a lot of deals here in Ghana, and there's a very strong relationship between our two countries. The OPIC team, they leave no stone uncovered. So they were very diligent. They came to Ghana many times. They met with the relevant stakeholders to ensure that the affordability of the project had been vetted. There was a whole back and forth around the projections for enrollment at the university. They had to present to us a plan in terms of how they intended to use the facilities, how the rent would be affordable. We adjusted the rent multiple times as part of that negotiation because it really doesn't benefit us to have a project that's not affordable. This is the current situation where you have unfinished buildings is kind of our worst nightmare because they're not serving the students at all. And we're a social impact company, so that's what we're in this for. So it's far better for us to uncover an issue during the due diligence process. And we simply didn't. When we uncovered issues, we addressed them, we made the adjustments accordingly. And then we got to a place where we said, okay, this is viable. Based on these assumptions and these projections, this is viable. The university will need to perform these actions, and assuming that they perform them, this project will be not just a win-win, but it will bring the university billions of dollars in additional revenues over the life of that concession term and thereafter.
Okay, so you had gone through the entire process. You were convinced the council was involved. Everything looked good. You signed. You began construction. And then a new vice chancellor comes in and says, this is not good. How did you take that news from the new VC who said, and I'm going to read a quote for you. You can just tell me what you make of that particular quote from the vice chancellor, who is the current vice chancellor of the university. He says, I don't understand. You don't understand. The council doesn't understand. So we are where we are because we don't understand. There are clauses in that agreement that completely enslave the university as an institution. And so right now, the answer is that to that question is as to why we signed that agreement. Let me be very frank with you. Where we are, nobody can hide any fact from us or from the public. This question remains unanswered. And I wish somebody provide me with an answer. Can you provide him with an answer?
Sure. What is interesting about that quote, and I've read that quote, is that I came to Ghana every month for over a year, hoping to be received by the university. And the vast majority of the time I wasn't. So when there's new leadership, we understand that there will be a learning curve and they need to get up to speed. We oversaw the handing over notes, so we ensured that there would be handing over notes. We ensured that I even knew in what file cabinet the files were located just in case there was an issue in terms of accessing information, and we were happy to provide any information. But we really weren't called to explain, which was why
there was no meeting.
We did meet with them. We requested meetings. But during those meetings, we didn't have the opportunity to get into the nuances of this is why this is required, this is why that is required. Most of the time, I was told that they were too busy to meet me. Now, to get to the core of that question, so there are a couple of contexts that are important. First of all, I might understand where the University Council would have questions, in part because the University Council changed over in September 2015. So it was a whole brand new council. So that was a coincidence that was an unfortunate timing in the project. You had a new vice chancellor and you also had a new council. So it would be natural that they would have questions. I often invited and welcomed, but nobody took me up on it, but I was happy to present to the council directly and to answer any of those questions. In terms of the clauses that he that he notes enslave the university, I would like to point out that OPIC is very consistent with the clauses that they require for financing. So any project that involves OPIC financing here in Ghana will have those clauses in it. And they are part of what makes these contracts accountable. The whole premise is that we make the project more affordable by ensuring that whatever is agreed will be delivered. So if we agree that the project will cost X and it will be delivered by this time frame, we deliver that. And if they agree that they will pay this rent and they will do the following things, they will provide this security and whatnot, that they must deliver. And if they don't deliver on that, then the contract is enforceable accordingly. If those provisions were not there, those enslaving provisions, and I find that to be a very inflammatory term that doesn't necessarily facilitate cross-cultural investment as much as everybody in the world needs it to. We need your investment in America. I'm sure that...
But one question before you go on though. Did you meet the person who became the new vice chancellor in the course of the period of negotiation at any point? Was he at any of the meetings?
Yes, yes, he came to very few meetings, but I believe...
Did he speak up at those meetings?
Very rarely, but I do remember twice that he spoke up, and I remember a few things that he said. And I remember very clearly that he said, he would often say, a lot of what I read in the newspaper didn't come up in the meetings, to be clear.
He did not mention them?
He didn't say things like, this contract enslaves us. I don't remember him saying that to me directly.
All right, then hold on to that thought. Andrea Pizziconi is the CEO of Africa Integras, as we try to get to the bottom of why this deal has been discontinued by the University of Ghana. $64 million worth of infrastructure standing still. Keep watching Face to Face.
For regular news checks as they unfold. 2020 news, all day, all the time. Politics, sports, entertainment, business, and more. 2020 news. We bring you the world in 20 minutes.
Spend 30 minutes every weekday catching up with all the trending social media conversations of the day. If you tweet it, we'll read it. We might just even Skype you. 30 minutes is all it takes, so use the hashtag 30minutes on social media to catch our attention. Join the most interactive social media TV show weekdays at 5 p.m. only on City TV.
Every weekday at 8 p.m., City Newsroom brings you analysis of the major news stories of the day. In-depth, comprehensive, and researched. It's 1 hour of local and international news from 8 to 9 p.m. It's the City Newsroom. Weekdays on City TV.
You're welcome back to Face with the principal and founder of Africa Integras, Andrea Pizziconi. Now, Andrea, before we went on the break, you were telling us that the current Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana, Professor Odro, did attend some of the meetings that had been organized previously, and he did not say anything about the project.
Yes, so the project was presented to the academic board. There were about 25 or 30 of the senior management of the university that attended. So he would have been at that meeting, and there were a few other meetings, but at the very least that meeting, my understanding, at that day I do not recall him asking any questions, and my understanding is subsequent to that meeting he raised no concerns about the project. That was well before he had been appointed as Vice Chancellor.
Okay. And since then, have there been any engagements between your company and the university to deal with all these legal issues that have come up? Have you met?
So we did meet. We had one meeting where
One
we tried.
meeting?
Yeah. So I came to Ghana about a dozen times in the course of a year. I used to come to Ghana monthly, and sometimes more than monthly. And I understand that schedules are busy, and so I try to make myself available as much as possible. And most of the time he was not available to meet, but a couple of times at least, he did meet. Typically he would meet for the beginning of a meeting or come at the end of a meeting. And one time we had a meeting with regards to the contract. He did not attend. We talked about, our fundamental question was, what are your specific concerns with the contract? Tell us about them so that we can see how we can address them. I'd like to say and emphasize that it is important when doing PPPs that contracts that are signed are fundamentally enforced, and there is not a premise that everything is always up for negotiation. But equally, as a gesture of good faith, I came with OPIC, in fact, and I sat with OPIC and met with the university. He did not attend the substantive meeting. He met with me a few minutes prior to the meeting. And we asked them, please send us concretely a markup of exactly how you'd like to see the contract changed. They never did send that markup. We did discuss a few of the issues, and at the time, I felt that there were solutions for most of what they had raised. Or to the extent that a change could not be accommodated, OPIC was sitting next to me as the senior lender and as a government financier to explain why it was so important that clause was the way it was.
Okay, so the university currently says your deal that you put before the university for the project that you started, 1, is not viable. 2, was not favorable to the university. Do you agree?
No, I don't.
Why was it viable? How was it favorable?
I think that those are short sentences that don't give context. So one issue was the university had to recruit a minimum of around 2,000 students that would pay at the level of international students. So whether they were Ghanaian or international didn't matter. But as most people probably understand, there are different tiers of payment. So one of the things we liked about the project was that although it accommodated 19,000 students, it only required the university actually to increase its enrollment by around 2,000 students to be viable. And they had to recruit those students. And we, on our part, we had to provide a full-time senior member of our team to help them recruit those students. So we found somebody who was very respected in the industry to do so, and the university, for the most part, chose not to engage with that person. So ultimately, the university came back and tried to explain to us why it would be so impossible to recruit those students. We commissioned a report on how to recruit those students. So technically, if they didn't recruit those students at all, I can see where the rent would start to become uncomfortable for them, but they equally could have recruited more local students. So for example, to the extent that you have universal secondary education and you have upwards of 90 to 120,000 additional students coming out of secondary school, they could have filled those seats easily as well. So, but there was an assumption that enrollment had to increase. Why would you build 48,000 square meters if you didn't expect enrollment to increase at all? Their premise was they didn't feel that they felt, although those numbers, by the way, were established in the strategic plan of the university, which was approved by the council. So we didn't make up those numbers. And to be very clear, when we do the projections for a project and we do an affordability analysis for the project, we share it with the university. In fact, they have to co-author it with us. So before we even bring in OPIC financing, we have to agree with them, is this viable? Is this affordable? And then present it together to OPIC. So their finance director was deeply involved in making that case. And so ultimately that statement, we asked them subsequently, back up that statement. Why do you now think it's not affordable? They never gave us a specific report or analysis. All they said was, how could you think that we could have recruited those students? Last time I checked, there was a need for like another 10 million university seats on the continent. There are many students, not just in Ghana, but across Africa that respect the University of Ghana that would love an opportunity to study there. So we did not think that it was accurate that they couldn't recruit those 2,000 students.
But the University of Ghana also says that you lumped them with a project that was going to make you in excess of $250 million, whilst it cost you just $64 million. For a lot of people, they look at numbers like this and say, Africa Integras is ripping us off.
Yeah, it's funny when those statements are made, they never give context. So as we discussed prior, build, operate, transfer implies operate as well. So we had millions and millions of costs per year to operate the facilities. We had to do the facilities management, we had to maintain the building, so there's a replacement reserve required. There are many costs. We pay taxes, we have to pay for the cost of the financing. That's millions of dollars a year. So the cost of the project is not $64 million. That's just the cost, the estimated cost to build the physical buildings up front. Over the life of the 25-year concession, significantly more than that. And also in terms of that number, and that's not the accurate number, that is a ballpark that's been thrown around. I don't think I can even convey the accurate number, but we'll go with that ballpark. What it doesn't talk about is what the university stood to make. So
they stood to make money.
Of course, when you expand infrastructure, universities around the world ultimately are very successful businesses. So a good university makes a significant surplus every year. And the University of Ghana is like a large corporation. It has revenues of upwards of $120 million a year. It's big. And so you hear that number, 64 million, it sounds like a big number, but in comparison to the size of that university and the amount of infrastructure that we were developing, it's actually not. We were on the construction cost spectrum on the lower end of construction costs. But the university, by having the capacity for 19,000 students, which could be 19,000 undergrads, it could be 10,000 graduate students, you could slice it up in many different ways. But the bottom line was the university stood to make closer to $2 billion during the concession period in additional revenues.
Okay.
And that was something that was pointed out to the university at one point by members of government, but I don't think that it stuck with them, that it's really, when you do PPPs, both parties need to mutually benefit or it's not sustainable. So in most PPPs, the investor return is always very highly negotiated. So you agree it needs to be 16% or 17%, and then all of the models solves for that. And then you look to see, can the university afford that number? If the university can't afford that number, then you have two options. Can you find another investor that has a social impact mission and wants to do it for 10%? Possibly, but not at that scale usually. So then you look at, can it be viable? If it can't, then the project doesn't proceed. And then what you look at is, what does the university make? Because that builds the viability case. The university's return was well over something like 70%. I mean, and that is a hallmark of our projects. We don't do a project where the investors will make more than the university. The university should always make the most money.
Okay. And this was clear to the university?
Very clear.
Okay.
Well, it was clear to the first administration of the university. We didn't get to have those detailed conversations with the second administration because they just didn't engage with us at that level of detail.
Andrea Pizziconi is the CEO of Africa Integras. Keep watching Face to Face.
Tune in to The Point of View, Mondays and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. as Bernard Avlet takes the news further. He will bring the right guests, ask them the relevant questions, and get you the real insights you need on the big stories for the day.
I predict that 2 billion that GATT is supposed to raise is going to be very challenging. And I say that very carefully. Think about it.
The Point of View with Bernard Avlet, Monday and Wednesday nights, only on City TV. For all the news, analysis, projections, and policies that affect your business, curated and delivered in a simple and timely format. Watch Business Dashboard, your most comprehensive source of business news, every weekday at 7 p.m. only on City TV. Business Dashboard on City TV is sponsored by ADB Bank, truly a Greek and more. The moment you've been waiting for is here. On Saturday, 23rd March 2019, as part of 97.3 CTFM's Heritage Month, comes the music of Ghanaian origin concert, Mogo 2019. Time to experience the cocktail of the old and new, the legends and the crooners on one stage. Mogo 2019, featuring Amanziba, KK Kabobo, Adani Best, Kwabna, Akwabwa, Kofi B, Sina Soul, and a Kwampa Band for one night and one night only. The music of Ghanaian origin, Mogo 2019. Serving you an overdose of nostalgia and happy feet. Venue, National Theatre. Date, Saturday, 23rd March 2019. Rate is 120 Ghana cedis. Gates open at 7 p.m. Call 0205-973-973 or 0302-224959 for ticket reservation. Mogo is powered by 97.3 CTFM and supported by CTTV.
There's a question I need to ask, and I'm hoping you'll give me an answer. Did you take the University of Ghana to an arbitration?
Yes, so we engaged in a dispute resolution process that was based in London, and we had a favorable award in our favor. It was not an arbitration because the contract allowed for a fast-track process. Upon the conclusion of a mediation process, the parties could mutually agree to pursue an expert decision. The parties in this case did mutually agree. So the university and this was led by our investment partner, WP Carey, or CPA 18, which is a US REIT. So they made the decision with the university on who that expert arbitrator would be. So it was an arbitrator, but it was technically not an arbitral award, which is why I believe that what's been spoken about in the media has been confusing. It had the same binding effect of an arbitral award.
Was the university present?
Yes. Yes. The university fully participated. The university mutually selected that arbitrator. In fact, the irony is we're the only ones that didn't select the arbitrator. Our majority investor selected the arbitrator with the university. We did not.
Do you want this project to continue?
Of course I do. Of course. It's heartbreaking that there are, what I think about all the time, I think about two groups of people in particular. I think about the 1,200 construction workers that lost their jobs and didn't get Christmas bonuses when the project was suspended, and what it means to their families. And I think about the thousands and thousands of young people, even since the project was suspended, who could have gone to UG but haven't been able to, and may or may not ever get a university education. I mean, what was exciting about this project is that over the course of the next 30 years, it was estimated that hundreds of thousands of additional students would have been educated at UG as a result of this project. That's a game changer. We know that higher education is one of the most important determinants of long-term GDP growth. You know, you look at South Korea and Ghana had the same GDP in the 1950s. South Korea's had the highest GDP per capita growth in the world. And the reason why is because they invested in university education. And so that's always been the mission and premise of our company. And the revenues, the income tax revenues to the government for doing this project would have also been in the billions. So it's completely tragic that those buildings are not even built. They're 65% finished.
Have you been to the university since you've been around to have a look?
Well, as you know, I came straight here from the airport because my flight was delayed. So I haven't been there yet, but I will go during this trip.
Now, there have been reports
Yes.
that as part of the arrangements, Africa Integras planned to privatize the University of Ghana if it fails to meet its obligations.
That's completely false. Yeah, no, that's completely false. There's nothing in the contract that gives us any right to operate the university whatsoever. And I want to be very clear about that. That's not what we do, and that's not the mechanisms in the contract that allow us to enforce the contract.
So, till date, how much money have you spent on this project?
I think that number technically is confidential, but I will say that, and I have to respect that there's still outgoing issues, tens of millions of dollars were spent. I mean, you can do the math, in essence. It's a 65% finished project, and it's 64 million, so one can infer how much has been spent.
And what has been your strategy for re-engagement, if?
So as I said earlier, we go where we're invited. And this is sensitive because nothing would mean more to me. I mean, I'm in this for the ribbon cutting and to go back every year. I mean, one thing that's never been discussed is all of the commitments we made after the deal was finished or after the construction to continue to support the university with venture capital funds to support student entrepreneurship, with grants for different student populations, our full-time staff member that was going to help the university to fundraise abroad. So I was looking forward to all of that. But, you know, ultimately, I just desperately would like to see these students flourishing there. I desperately want to see, well, when I say desperate, it's just, it is a hole in my heart that this project has not been finished.
But you were involved with this from the start.
Yes.
Have you sat down since this went sour and tried to figure out how directions changed so quickly for a process that seemed to have everybody on board and in a matter of a few weeks seemed to have the same group of people minus one go in the opposite direction and say, we don't agree with all these things that we've been involved in for the past 18 months?
There was a bit of a perfect storm because it wasn't just -1. So it was the same group of people. Well, let's look at it. The University Council changed over. So there was a totally new institutional memory there. Pretty soon after the Vice Chancellor changed over, there was a new government. And to be clear, this new government is they seem very clear that contracts ought to be honored and that investors should be respected, and by all means they tried to be constructive throughout this process. It wasn't their project. We didn't work very closely with the previous government either. It's for the universities, it's their sovereign right to secure their own financing, but there was a change in the government, and that affects things. There was a change in the council again. So the council changed over in September 2015, but then the councils were all, in essence, abolished in January 2016. And then there was another 6 months before there was another council appointed. So that was another hiccup. And there were also changes in the governance of my investor. So I had WP Carey, they had a very significant shakeup in their senior management, and that changed their focus directionally as well. So actually, arguably, everybody changed other than me.
Okay.
And that might have had a factor in this.
Okay. So, Andrea, enough of the business. Let's talk a bit about you and some of the things you're interested in. You sing.
I do, yes.
Very well. I watched a couple of concerts you performed under, and I was amazed. How do you spend your time between being a successful corporate woman and touring with jazz groups?
Well, it's all related, actually. I was actually on a world tour with a group that I was leading many years ago, and I was in Thailand, and I saw child labor for the first time up close. I saw a little boy. We were on a riverboat cruise, and I saw a little boy come out of a factory and wave at us. And I remember thinking to myself, that little boy is not coming to our concert that night, and he might never make it to a live show. And it made me feel that if I could, I would sing all day. I'd write music and produce music all day. But I didn't feel like that was the highest contribution that I could make to society. I had done community development before, and the light bulb that went off in my head was, I grew up, my mom is an educator, retired, she was an educator, and I thought if I can just build schools, which is something that I had done a bit of as a young person, if I did that, maybe I could earn the right to go back to singing full time. And then in the process, I realized that they go together. My passion is for empowering young people, and it's the same in music. So the music that I write and is about supporting young people or vulnerable people in general, or just getting people to think differently through messages. So I actually, for a period of time, went a little bit dark while establishing Africa Integras. I couldn't sing quite as much. So to answer your question, the balance is delicate. But once my team was up and running and we had sustained ourselves better, I went back to music. And now what I write, in fact, I'm releasing a song in about a month.
Oh.
Yeah, and what I write reinforces the messages of the stories that I see and that I live in this work.
So successful CEO, singer, and you have a passion for education as well. I'm told you're working on a project here in Ghana with some young women as well.
Well, it's a global project, but I'm very excited on this trip, having some wonderful meetings with some great organizations like CAMFED, who are very active here in Ghana. And what it is in some ways it came about from what I learned from the UG project and other projects that we've embarked upon, Kenyatta University and elsewhere. And it's about the treatment of girls while they're at university and before. So the initiative is called Girls First Finance. And it's really looking at how we can support young girls and young ladies better to just manifest their dreams with dignity. So to really ensure that the mentorship and the financing that they receive to allow them to advance their studies and their careers, it doesn't require any compromises that they are uncomfortable with. There's no exploitation, that they can be their best selves and be healthy. And so it is an initiative. It's a fintech product, so it will be technology based. It will be an app. It will provide student loans for young ladies and young men who are willing to be allies of empowered young ladies. And it will provide mentorship, access to internships, empowerment curriculum. It's a fairly holistic initiative, and I'm really excited to be launching it in the coming months.
All right, then. Thank you very much. Andrea Pizziconi, founder and managing principal of Africa Integras, throwing light on what the situation is between her company and the University of Ghana. It's a battle that for the past year has made headlines in the country, a stalled $64 million project. And we're happy you made time for us on City TV on Face to Face. So we're hoping to meet you again, Andrea. Pleasure meeting you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Face to Face. My name is Godfred Akoto Boafo. Have a good day.